what she has said earlier, that some of the program agency.
Hello and welcome to the program. This is Moneyline with Nancy. I am Nancy Naji and we're coming to you live on African Independent Television. You may be wondering where I am, that I'm not in my regular space, which is the studio. I'm at the event center where the program about the non-oil sector has been brought to the fore. What do I mean? The Nigerian Export Promotion Council is holding its first annual national conference. In fact, it's maiden one since inception. And why is this important? The theme is export for survival. We know what's been happening around the world now. Russia's invasion of Ukraine, COVID-19 pandemic, and it is important that Nigeria is able to diversify its economy beyond the rhetoric. That is why this event has been put together, and that is why we are here. All right, at this point, let's quickly take you through the welcome address of the ED, who is the Executive Director and the Chief Executive Officer of the NEPC, Dr. Ezra Yakusak.
It is my singular honor and privilege to present this welcome address at the first ever National Conference on Non-Oil Export organized by the Nigerian Export Promotion Council. More importantly for me and the NEPC team is the presence of the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, His Excellency Professor Yemi Osibanjo. The initiative for organizing this conference could not have come at a better time than now, considering the plethora of challenges bedeviling the non-oil export sector, which among others include the adverse effect of the COVID-19 pandemic on export operations, the distress calls of practitioners on regulatory constraints, and restrictions on export businesses, and of course the dear need to strengthen the diversification agenda of the federal government. Of a greater concern is Nigerian non-oil export performance in recent times in comparison to import. From the Pre-Shipment Inspection Agency report, it reveals that significant growth in export proceeds in the last 5 years, that is 2017 to 2021, from $1.2 billion to $3.4 billion as against an annual average of $22 billion food importation alone into the country. To close this gap, concerted efforts are required from all practitioners in the non-oil export value chain. Hence, the convergence of diverse stakeholders with varied and wide experience in export and quasi-export businesses to participate in this national dialogue as a veritable way of resolving emerging issues and allying the palpable fears of export practitioners on government decisions and actions perceived to be inimical to export operations. The theme of this conference, Export for Survival, Optimizing Nigeria's Non-Oil Export Potentials, was carefully couched to reflect Council's approach in repositioning non-oil export for increased foreign exchange earnings. The Export for Survival campaign, which was launched by Nigerian Export Promotion Council on 19 February 2022, is a clear call to action. It is a deliberate effort to stimulate national consciousness to current realities in the non-oil export ecosystem. It is also a wake-up call for massive investment and a campaign to leverage our vast potentials and increase opportunities in the sector. This is a sure way to sustainable economic growth and prosperity. We at the NEPC firmly believe that our survival as a nation depends on non-oil export.
Welcome back. The Honorable Minister of State for Industry, Trade and Investment was also here, as she is Ambassador Marion Katagum, where she did open this event and made some remarks. Just take a listen.
As part of a strategic initiative to bring together key stakeholders that will help create a framework to transform the huge export potentials in the country. Let me first of all acknowledge the efforts of the NEPC for organizing this event, which is in line with the federal government's economic diversification drive, as Nigeria can no longer depend on oil as its major source of foreign exchange earnings. This gathering is therefore expected to come up with robust recommendations for a policy framework that will boost agricultural production, processing and export for increased wealth and job creation for the overall benefit of the nation and its people. I'm confident that with the array of quality speakers that have been slated to speak today, this conference will come up with robust and profound solutions that will be proffered to the myriad of problems bedeviling the non-oil export sector, with a view to creating a roadmap for sustainable growth of the sector. All these are meant to expose made in Nigeria products in the international market and expand the horizon for our MSMEs, especially within the framework of the AFCFTA. I should also not forget to mention the recent ad hoc committee on agro products set up by His Excellency the Vice President under Nepc, and whose recommendations are being currently implemented under NAP 7.0, and also the strengthening and expansion of our National Agric and Agro Products Development Initiative offices. These are called NADI offices throughout the Federation. This is aimed at the identification of new commodities and improving the value chain for products. More importantly, I must state here that the Ministry is actively implementing the National Quality Policy, which is meant to guide Nigeria as a country to build a sustainable quality infrastructure in order to make our products competitive in both the domestic and international markets. Let me also encourage members of the organized private sector to deepen their partnerships with government for the sustained growth of the economy. I'm optimistic that stakeholders here present will come up with appropriate recommendations on strategies to boost the contribution of non-oil exports to the nation's economy. This will, no doubt, stimulate investments across the commodity value chain, chart a sustainable course towards food security, and increased export for wealth and job creation.
Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, who is also the Chair of the National Economic Council, at this event did reiterate why it is important for Nigeria to diversify and move beyond oil into the non-oil sector. Don't forget that just a few days ago, the Bretton Woods institutions, the IMF and the World Bank did say that there is so much capacity and potential for the non-oil sector to move Nigeria out of the doldrums. Take a listen to what the Vice President did say.
The theme, Export for Survival, carries an urgency that perfectly frames the challenges that we will increasingly face if we do not accelerate the diversification of the Nigerian economy. We understand and we fully appreciate the extensive impact that this will have on our people. And so we are committed to moving quickly and assuredly. Our considered response so far has been carried out in the light of, first, the dynamism of the Nigerian people and our multi-sectoral potential for innovation and productivity at scale. Second, the responsibility of government at all levels in leading the charge to unlocking this potential. And this involves not just the federal government, but the states also. We are on our way with respect to all of our commitments. The challenge facing our non-oil export economy should be viewed especially in the light of what has transpired in the last 8 years. In 2021, Nigeria's non-oil revenue stood at about 1.15 trillion naira, which represented a growth then of about 4.75% in the fourth quarter especially, and a contribution of about 92.51% to the nation's overall GDP. So in actual fact, the non-oil economy has always contributed, of course, significantly, the majority, if you like, or most to our GDP. In 2019, the year preceding COVID-19, non-oil revenue represented 92.68% of our total GDP. So there again, almost a 1% increase. The growth following the year indicates the growing resilience of our non-oil export sector, and it's very clear that we've also become even more susceptible to growth as opposed to shocks. So it's becoming evident now that we are more resilient, we are more able to resist some of the international shocks. And you can see even today with what is going on in the supply chain, especially with the Ukrainian invasion and all of that. You'll see that clearly if we were not concentrating on local production, it would be extremely difficult to go. And as you've heard, from the SGF, some of what we're doing, especially in the rice sector and in some other areas, especially in the crop sector. Beyond these numbers that we see and we hear are human stories of bold visions and great persistent innovation and the unflagging spirit of Nigerians across the country who are building model companies and businesses, hands deep in the plow. Some of our best stories, of course, are in the tech sector. In the last 7 years, 6 tech companies have become unicorns, companies valued at over $1 billion each. So it's evident that there is a lot that's going on. And one of the reasons why you'll find that the tech sector is going so well is because, I believe, of the very light hand of the regulatory sector upon it. And this is one of the things that we must seek to achieve. We must seek to achieve a situation where regulators see themselves as facilitators of business, as opposed to policemen or those who may just provide some obstacles. That the very best approach is for regulators to see themselves as those that must promote business, and that their success will be measured against the success of business. And this is, I think, one of the very important innovations that has been brought to bear through the MSME clinics. So our job as government is to assiduously enable businesses, especially with regulatory policies and procedures and processes that are continuously optimized for greater efficiency and easing the flow of business across the sectors. And this must be coupled urgently with the supporting infrastructure needed to aid production, distribution, and export.
Let's quickly take a break, and when we return from the break, the program continues. It's still Moneyline with Nancy. Don't forget to join us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel at Moneyline with Nancy TV. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back. At this point, let's quickly launch the panel sessions. So many panel sessions, informative, deep and incisive, where we had the key stakeholders, exporters, regulating agencies, and other affiliated agencies around the non-oil sector did speak. At this point, let's quickly take you through the first technical session on emerging issues disrupting Nigeria's non-oil exports and innovative solutions.
The fact that Nigeria is only able to take up less than 1% of the global market share of most products it exports is a sign that all is not well. Apart from the perennial macroeconomic, infrastructure, and policy environment challenges, there are emerging challenges that have compounded the situation and led to declining volume of the meager exports from the country. They will normally include repatriation sales price, readiness to export, risk on payment method, relationship management, CBN rebate, replacement of collaterals, and regulations in the export market. Let's try to take a look at this one briefly. One of the major emerging challenges of the export business sector is the control of the sales price of repatriated export proceeds by the CBN. This has been a source of discouragement to exporters who sell their export proceeds at the controlled price on the importer and exporter FX rate. Readiness to export. More than 1,000 businesses registered with NEPC, I hope I'm right, NEPC is here, to export every year. But from what I'm told, less than 800 are able to export each year. And also, most businesses are only able to export once or twice. This speaks to high level of dropout from export business. This is mainly due to their lack of readiness for the export business. That's my own assessment. Risk on payment methods, and these are recent developments. There are now incidences of fake letters of credit being received via SWIFT by Nigerian banks and their export customers. There are also incidences of fake documented collection transactions being received by Nigerian exporters and their banks. Relationship management. The fact that Nigerian exporters do not have presence abroad to manage relationship with their buyers is making them to lose business opportunities to their counterparts in Asia and other parts of the world. Of course, the CBN RT 200 FX program is a good initiative designed to stimulate the growth of non-lead export in Nigeria, which is what I think this conference is majorly about. And the program has a pillar for the non-lead export FX rebate scheme. However, the 65 naira to $1 offered by CBN is not covering the FX gap between the official and the parallel markets. Many of us know that most exporters, particularly manufacturers, never get enough to bring in their raw materials, their spares, and their machines. So they have to go to the parallel market. So if you are going to give any scheme that is going to ameliorate this situation, you need to ensure that that difference that they have to incur when they are sourcing their raw materials and so on are covered.
We're not here to, most of the time we usually come to speak about the challenges. Challenges, one thing, opportunities, very important as well. So that's what I think we need to address here now, the opportunities that are abound. Quickly, let me start with you, Dr. Yama. We are, look at cocoa for example. Let's use cocoa. Cocoa, Nigeria used to do in the late 70s, early 80s, we were #1 exporter, producer. Right now, we're a distant third or fourth, sometimes number 5th. Number one currently is Cote d'Ivoire. Number 2 is Ghana. And Cameroon is, I think, is even third right now. So 4th. So for me, can you give us a insight into the ways in which we can, 1, boost production, 2, production is one thing, export is another. Just give us a quick walkthrough of what we have faced in the past and what you think should be going forward, particularly using cocoa as an index crop.
Thank you, moderator. Well, using cocoa, even cashew, sesame, and all. Cocoa's case is a case of we abandoned cocoa, mainly because of oil. The government wasn't really concentrating on that sector, except of late. Everybody was just talking about oil. But thank God today, we've been battling this since about 2001, letting them know that for us to get the dollars in, we really need to. It's not just about export, it's not just about processing, but we have to go back to the roots. The most difficult aspect is production. And when I mean production, I'm talking of farming the product itself. There have been so many programs geared towards giving incentives to exports, but what programs do they have in giving incentives to production?
Averagely, for the rubber production, it's about 120,000 metric tons per annum. It's on the dwindling. One, like I mentioned earlier, it has to do with challenges for production. There is a challenge in land acquisition. That is basically one of the key challenges there. We, for instance, have a lot of challenges with the communities via Islam. Such, because due to non-availability of lands, there are no new crops springing up. This definitely has hindered the production. It's an avenue to play with government to see how they can come in. We knew fully well that there is an agency that's assisting in land acquisition. Fortunately, rubber was not among those crops that were given such preference. Furthermore, the land use decree has to be built in order to enable farmers to enable boost agricultural production. The land use decree has to be built. Thank you.
Madam, can you speak to the area of incentives, talking about the incentives as well as the categorization of those incentives and how well those incentives have worked so far and what needs to be done to improve on it?
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Talking about the NEPC incentives, I think the way it's categorized is okay. But in addition, just like if I, as a person now, I want to aspire for the highest office of this nation, I don't need to pay a dime. I just go collect the nomination form and fill in my form. They should recognize and be gender friendly and sensitive. So in that incentive scheme, let there be a criteria to recognize the effort of the women that are trying to also make a mark. Then, I would also suggest that NEPC should have, as part of its objective, giving of grants to companies, upcoming SMEs, to enable them mechanize. It's not cheap to mechanize. So if they have it as part of the objective, they do something like in line with what you said, DOS and some of the international financiers, they will have a unit in the incentives department maybe that will give grant to some trusted, focused SMEs and follow them through to the point of mechanization.
First of all, I can say that the grant, 50 billion received by the NEPC, it is fairly distributed to the beneficiary. I'm one of the beneficiaries in that I'm having export trade house, and I know so many people here who are beneficiary for so much packages and the kind of project they wanted to do. I see that this kind of grant should be sustainable, and because it is embodied a lot of programs, some of them it is domestic export warehouse. Of course, there are so many new exporters that they do not have access to. They don't have their own warehouse, they don't have the machineries. In case of the common facility, they can aggregate those products and they come and they process their products, taking out from their capital to build the warehouse, to buy the machine and all this. And as well, the export trade house that were being distributed across the globe, it will help. And if more of those export trade houses will be initiated and give another grant for other markets also to emerge, that will be a wonderful thing.
Welcome back. This next session will be focusing on strengthening institutional capacity for effective trade facilitation. A lot has been said that the agencies along trade or along the non-oil sector should indeed not be policemen, but trade facilitators. Let's take a listen.
And the quality of our institutions are very critical in facilitation of trade. And incidentally, most of these institutions are essentially public sector institutions. So I would like to go right into it. I look at the concept and scope of trade facilitation, the components of trade facilitation, the institutional issues in trade facilitation, the forex policy impacts in trade facilitation, and some reform imperatives for the economy to progress. The net exports must be positive, not negative. We should be exporting more than we are importing. Now, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, she's the current DG of WTO. At the recent ministerial retreat that was done, I think, a few months ago, she addressed the ministers, the president and the vice president. As she said, and I quote, Nigeria's trade costs are too high. According to the World Bank, trade costs for 2019 and trade costs for African countries are on average an equivalent of 305% tariff. And Nigeria is even slightly higher at 306%. These numbers are 1.5 times higher than the trade costs in high-income countries. Such high costs are not conducive to forming regional value chains. Because when we are talking about exports, it's not just about primary production. Primary production is important, just as you have heard in the last panel. But you should be looking at how to develop a value chain, how we can connect to the global community depending on what products we are talking about. And if the trade cost continues to be high, whether we are talking of import or exports, it works against the whole idea of connecting to the regional value chain. Congestion, capacity constraints, and high costs in our ports make it difficult for anyone seeking to do supply chain operations in Nigeria and hence expand trade from there. So these are some of the things that have been said earlier, but I'm just quoting this to get the perspective of somebody as high as the DG of WTO. So this is a major issue. One of the biggest issues confronting the growth and development of our country. Of course, the concept of trade facilitation. Trade facilitation looks at how procedures and controls governing the movement of goods across national borders can be improved to reduce associated cost burdens and maximize efficiency while safeguarding legitimate regulatory objectives. The main objective of trade facilitation is to reduce the complexities and costs associated with cumbersome border procedures and controls while maintaining efficient compliance controls. Trade facilitation is, again, we have various definitions of it. The simplification and harmonization of international trade procedures. In its narrowest sense, trade facilitation refers to the reduction of the trade costs associated with moving goods across borders. Then a broader interpretation encompasses all non-tariff barriers to trade, including behind-the-borders costs associated with institutional and business environment, services in support of trade, and physical infrastructure in transport, energy, and ICT. More recent definitions have been broadened to include the environment in which trade transactions take place, that is, the
the transparency and professionalism of the customs and regulatory environments.
We also need to realize that trade facilitation discussion in Nigeria is very robust and wide, particularly when it comes to export. Export, I believe, is the only industry or sector that you deal with more than 10 agencies of government, both from the organized private sector and the government sector. If I put in the organized private sector and the government sector, we'll be dealing with up to 30 agencies or OPS in export. And then the problem with trade facilitation comes in, how do we simplify the process of all these agencies? How do we harmonize them?
As per policy harmonization, I feel that Nigeria is lacking in that aspect, because most of these relevant agencies, most of them are just trying to feel so superior than the other. Just like I said in this first one, is Lagos customs feeling so superior than customs in Kano? So I really didn't understand.
It seems there's a big gap between those that are making the policies and that have the knowledge to make the policies and those that are implementing those policies. Where do we get the middle line? For example, it is very obvious. You said something that is very critical now. You said customs does not make policies on export. Who makes policies on non-export? Obviously, there is a CBN through the Trade and Exchange Department that makes policy on export. That's what it simply means. So, custom is not responsible. Nigerian Export Promotion Council is not responsible. And then all the policies that regulate export is being made by the CBN. There's a gap. There's a gap. What do you think about the gap?
Nigeria cannot live in isolation. Nigeria is part of the global village. But we behave as if everything starts and begins and stops here. You know, my good friend Muda was giving a definition of trade facilitation. The simple meaning is that make trade easier. If you make trade easier, more trade will happen. The truth is that when you are creating barrier to trade is barrier to development. You see, we are talking of gas. The government agencies on that, they know what they're supposed to do. They know. I will give you a typical example. Government has been coming up with good plans. I work for government for some time. You know, and finally, the issue of connectivity is also very, very important. You know, we have been complaining we pay high freight rates, but there are reasons for that. Because when you look at our connectivity index, you will discover that we are not faring well. Connectivity means how near are you to the global market? Are you near to the global market? It is not a question of distance. It is not distance. You might be maybe 50 kilometers, but you are very, very far away from global market.
We are majorly through with the expansion. So we have done what everybody has to do in this industry to keep pace with the infrastructure development in line with the trade and economic growth. But port and terminal operator are the last mile of the relay race. Before that, you have the roads, the bridges, the rails, and all the connectivity, right? Part of it. Also, the policies, I was really surprised hearing that we have to fly in custom officers to Kano to clear. I mean, I cannot believe it, right? So my request to all of us will be to also look at international best practices. We are not trying to do something which nobody has done. Developed countries, even developing countries, look at a tiny country like Bangladesh. I can assure you, maybe anybody has gone to Bangladesh, their ports are worse than Nigeria. Believe me. Believe me. But look at their exports. How have they done it? So we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can go and learn from those who have done it and try to see how can we implement it. I'm sure the concerns of the customs and the central bank is the same as in Nigeria, right? To safeguard the interests of your country and economy. So I think if we look at it in that way, we should be able to avoid continuation of the same challenges and problems. Where Nigeria is in its economic stage, we really need quantum leap, breakthrough. And we can't have breakthrough unless we are ready to make significant change. And the change will only start once we accept that we've got to do something different than what we have been doing until now. And that involves ownership. I see and I hear that there are a lot of countries, you ask questions that, so who is taking responsibility of that? And everybody is looking at each other. So we need unity of command, ownership, direction to really make a significant change in order to promote export and facilitate the trade. Thank you.
For non-oil exports, Nigeria's non-oil exports to succeed, we must have market access. And not just about market access, but a sustainable one at that. This next session will be speaking about sustainable market access for Nigerian non-oil exports.
The non-oil export is the future. The diversification of the non-oil export is the future of Nigeria and of all the African countries and all other developing countries. And SPS requirements. These are some of the things that we had series of experiences. Currently, some of our company is now, but some few years back, where some of the Nigerian agricultural products are facing some reject from the EU. We still have a platform now where any rejected exportable product to the EU being reported. And we in the need are getting alert to that signal. And therefore, for us to engage in export, definitely we should be able to know the export requirement. Limited knowledge and understanding of the characteristics of consumers in the export market and lack of capacity to meet the volume requirement of many potential mass market customers. Lack of resources and know-how to establish and support Nigeria's product brand. Nigeria tariffs and non-tariff barriers on critical industrial input needed to boost manufacturing. Unpredictable interest rate and exchange rate. So, the solution is as follows. We must encourage efficient production and distribution of goods and services for the domestic and global markets. We must increase Nigeria's share of intra-African and global trade by attracting substantial local and foreign investment.
There have been arguments here and there. Some are of the opinion that AFCFTA is just going to be a paper tiger, not tiger foods, that it's not going to be an administrative framework. But we believe, I'm one of those who believe very strongly, that this is it's like a throbbing, exciting potential, especially for the Nigerian MSME manufacturer. I keep using the word Nigerian MSME manufacturer, not because I want to discriminate, but because I heard it here in this hall yesterday. People were complaining that Nigerian indigenous exporters don't have any significant proportion of Nigeria's exports abroad and export incentives. So now we have an AFCFTA, and we just listened to a presentation on the policy framework. I know you've been doing quite a lot of sensitization. I know you were our guest speaker in the town hall that the network of practicing non-oil exporters of Nigeria held a while back. And I would just like you to share with us in the next few minutes what the AFCFTA holds for Nigerian exporters as opportunities.
If you want to go to some African countries now that is with visa, it's at least a week or two. Other people that have visa free will get there, get the deal done. But these are areas where AFCFTA will address. Now, it will work. Part of what he has done for this to work is about the institutional framework. So let's take the Customs Corporation, for instance. The customs in Nigeria must be able to interact with counterparts in South Africa and so on. and not only maybe by phone, but also the systems should be able to talk to themselves. And if you think about that, then that means that the local laws of all the African countries must allow it. So if your local law does not permit you to transmit data, then that's a problem. So domesticating the AFCFTA agreement is a key element of this. And I can go on and on, but I'm watching time. But I think the other element is the consumer aspect of it. If you look at the enabling trade index for Nigeria 2016, the biggest issue we have is access to foreign markets. If you drill down, is consumers' acceptance of Nigeria's products and services. And there's a link between your products and services and your country's image. So beyond what the AFCFTA agreement does, we need to also then start looking at our image as a country, the products themselves. You know, what do these products, how are you competing compared to other products in the market?
But there are challenges. The stories have not been quite rosy as it looks. I know the issue of financing, coming from the SME point of view, I know in some countries like India, where I used to buy a lot of raw materials for some of our products, our supplier, you know, whenever he's supplying to us, he's shipping to us, gets the value of his bill of lading the moment he submits it to the bank. That way, doesn't have to wait for maybe 30 days or 5 days for me to receive the product and pay. So as soon as he is shipping, he is taking the documents to the bank, and then there is a credit guarantee, export credit guarantee bank of India, something like that, that gives him the value of what he is shipping, immediately for him to keep on doing his production. I don't think that there is a knowledge gap for me there. I don't know whether any bank is doing that or whether an Asian bank is doing that. But for an SME who is shipping outside Nigeria, you know, like he mentioned, Nigerian image, nobody pays you 100% when you are shipping from Nigeria. They want to see the goods before they even pay. So for an SME who is shipping and then he is going to wait for 30, 40, 60 days before he gets his payment, is not encouraging. So we have to find a way to bridge that gap. Another challenge that I may also have to mention here has to do with logistics. The last container we shipped to Liberia, I know I have to put up the storage in a 100 warehouse for 3 weeks, because the vessel that is supposed to pick the container was more eager to pick empty containers and take them back to maybe Europe, where they are having a shortfall of empty containers. So there is no guaranteed export corridor for Nigerian exporter, where you give export more priority than import. The customs seems to be looking at what they are generating for the federal government by making money from import than facilitating export.
Driving non-oil export through strategic partnerships is very important if we really want to develop the sector. Take a listen to this next session.
So I would like to know from you, as you also make a concluding statement, that it can be true that trading internationally may be challenging for Nigerians, but can you highlight maybe some of the key challenges that Nigerians are facing in trading internationally and maybe in trading with made in Nigerian products? Why is it easier to take Asian products and try and sell them as opposed to promoting made in Nigerian products? Thank you.
The first point is that our orientation is very wrong. Charity, they say, begins at home. And of course, when your domestic trade environment has a wrong footing, of course your export is dimmed already, collapsed, comatose. And by this I mean, by the time you look at our environment here, trading from one state to another, you have multiplicity of, impediments. Well, that also challenges your export. Number two is that I want us to look at one of the roles, the functions of NEPC, which is market intelligence. I think that market intelligence, yes, should be like a unit in NEPC. However, in many countries that I know that want to really access markets, they create an economic intelligence unit, majorly sometimes with the Ministry of Trade or Foreign Affairs. There is nothing like that here. In fact, I remember it was existing one time, but it's nothing. So that's one area. Because nobody is having an intelligence, that would say this is what is happening in this area, this is what is happening. Then the third point is this traceability that my sister talked about. And that's why our exports are collapsing. Traceability is one thing that would help our, export system to move forward. The fourth is the issue of, documentation. Hey, there are litany of documentations and requirements and procedures in Nigeria. Let us reduce this thing. Reduce them. They are bulky. They are too many. Reduce them. And then finally, I need to talk about one aspect that we have always forgotten. And this is a reward system. From time to time, I would want to see an NEPC that I started on this platform now. I will say on a yearly basis, I want to reward exporters who have done well. That will challenge others. That will challenge all of us. And then you also categorize and say, oh, for youths that are into exports.
Well, I think one thing you can start with is go to our webpage, because that will give you a lot of the basic information about our growth. We also offer quite a bit of assistance to those companies who are interested in doing that. But we also have very high standards in terms of which companies we will then work with in a concerted fashion. It's not going to help us if we spread our resources too thinly and don't help those companies who have a real possibility of exporting to the U.S. So we want to concentrate as much as we can on those. Many companies want to export, but the standards, I think, as Annabelle very well mentioned, are very tough. And the packaging, particularly, is absolutely key. If you can't make your product look wonderful, someone in the U.S. is not going to buy it. So there are lots of questions about that. There are ways that you could be helped, but you also have to look at, okay, do you have the resources? You may want to export to the U.S., you may have a great product, but it takes a lot of money to be able to do that. One of the things that we do in the Trade Hub is we have a lot of companies who are doing exports. And by giving them grants, that is also helping them to have the necessary capital to prepare their products for export.
Then we are working with NEPC and NICOP. We've been able to certify a lot of MSMEs on HACCP and ISO 22000. We've also worked with NEPC on certifying organic honey. Now, let me tell you something. Europe is the highest importers of honey, natural honey. But Nigeria cannot export to Europe because Nigeria is not part of the third country listing. So for any country to be able to export honey into Europe, you must be part of the third country list. And Nigeria is not there. We've been trying to get there. However, the ingenious thing that NEPC did was, rather than continue with all this, we are setting up a committee. The committee was set up since 2013, and we are still here today. So what they did was, they took an one of the company called Kendaki Honey, and then asked us to certify Kendaki Honey for organic. So the first thing ECOSAT did was to apply to the European Union to say, list Nigeria as one of the countries that first can can export organic honey into Europe. And then we now started the process with Kentucky honey, and today Kentucky honey is the first honey producer in Nigeria that has been certified for organic under the NEP and the EU organic regulation. That is thanks again to NEPC. We have also worked with NEPC training MSMEs in different standards, organic standards, HACCP, ISO, and all of that. NEPC has really tried for us and the MSMEs as it relates to sensitization on standards and certification. And then the way forward. It's good to speak about the problems. It's fantastic to discuss the problems. But my father used to tell me before he died that any place you go to and they tell you the problem but they don't tell you the solution is useless. So we have discussed the problems. Now let us look at the way forward. The first thing I would like to ask NEPC and plead with NEPC is to continue with the good work of having more companies under their belt that have been certified for different standards. Let us group these MSMEs and find out what kind of standard will help their products go into both the regional market and the other international markets. And then help them, just like CP does, to certify for just one of the standards. And then subsequent certification and renewal of certification, they can continue with the renewal. We also have signed in, I think over 2 years ago, an MOU with NEPC on the national, it was called the National Organic Development Program. And I plead with the new ED of NEPC to see how we can revisit that, that program and then list out some of the crops that Nigeria has comparative advantage in the international market and see how we can massively push out Nigerian products that are certified organic with certification as proof of compliance into the international market. We also would want NEPC to train people who are called factors. The question is, who are factors? Some weeks ago, I think sometime last month, the government of Nigeria said that henceforth, I think it was passed and fake, that foreigners will not be allowed anymore to buy products from farmers at farm gates. The foreigners you see are people who are called factors. So the question is, who are these factors? They are people who have market intelligence. So what it means is that they understand the international market. They understand the standards that the market requires. They understand how to get finance. They understand the primary production in itself. And then they know how to put people in a supply chain structure. Before you throw them away, you have to build our own internal capacity to replace them. If not, what we are trying to prevent, we are going to have a glut of products at farm gate and we will not be able to do anything about it. So it is time for NEPC to take the lead, train our people, train young people. There are a lot of young people who have nothing to do with their life. Train young people on how to become factors. Let them understand market intelligence. Let them understand contracts. Let them understand standards and certification so that they will now replace these people that we are asking to wait for us in Lagos. And then by the time the banks are able to give you money to aggregate, you will not aggregate rubbish. Because if you aggregate and get there and they say, no, we said ASTA certified ginger. What is all this? We are not going to buy. Banks will come after you. But if you understand what is required, it will make it easy for us to be able to replace them and we will not feel the loss.
So it's a wrap on today's edition of the program. Thank you all for joining us. In case you're wondering, this is still Moneyline with Nancy, not from my regular space, the studio, but from the center where the Made in National Conference of the Nigerian Export Promotion Council was held. Be the best you can be and be the change that you want to see. Don't forget to continue to be a very good ambassador for Nigeria. I'll see you all again next time.